Welcome to the Hay Kings podcast, brought to you by Vermeer, your expert in hay and forage equipment. Today on the Hay Kings podcast, we're joined by Scott Swanson. Scott and I are going to talk about old equipment and new equipment and some lessons we learned along the way on all of those things. We're going to talk about new marketing strategies and equipment to get into those markets. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, John. Definitely a pleasure to be on here.
Where did you start?
Well, I was born and raised in Niobrara, Nebraska, northeast part of the state. Fourth generation to the operation of the Swanson farm or Swanson family operation. My dad's always been row cropping and raising cattle, background in cattle on the feedlot. Grandma actually had a pheasant hunting operation or pheasant preserve where they'd raise, hatch pheasants, and then also turn those pheasants out to hunt and also sell those pheasants to other operations or just people that wanted birds to put out on their place for family hunts. Grew up in a really diversified operation. And then also my parents also owned a bar and steakhouse when I was a little kid. So to kind of go against what most people would say is the right way to grow up, I got to grow up in a bar along with the farming operation. So I got a pretty diverse background, I'd say, compared to a lot of people in my age. Anyway, I'm only 35. Got to see and do a lot of things, talk to interesting people. We did row crop of like corn and beans was our main thing. And then we did do some like winter wheat. We did do some oats and milo in there. Not a whole lot of those though. And then also we had a cow-calf operation. And then we'd take the calves in and background them. We would never finish whenever I was old enough to be a part of the operation. But mom and dad did quite a bit of that beforehand. And I guess just growing up in it, I really enjoyed the haying part, or maybe that was the easiest part for dad to stick me into, but got to run I don't know what the model number is, but it was an old white tractor with a cab. The air conditioner didn't work and had little pop-out windows. Run a 9-foot sickle bar, John Deere sickle mower, cutting hay all day. Dad would haul me out to the hay field at like around 7:30 and have a gallon water jug sticking in the corner of the cab. And my uncle would be out there as well. He'd start off the day in a cabless 40/20 John Deere 9-foot sickle bar, and we'd be going around that field. We'd quit for lunch for an hour, and then we'd come back, and he'd jump in that white tractor, and I'd get on that 40/20, and we'd run. Oh my gosh, you thought you conquered the day. You thought we cut a lot of acres, and probably when you're all said and done at the end of the day, you might have got 50 or 60 acres.
You're saying cutting in tandem with two 9-foot sickle bars.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I was 8 or 9. I mean, thought I was conquering the world, man. It's like, and then you progress. So like, I mean, I got to pile bales and got to cut a little hay when I was in that age range, and or with the self-propelled is what I'm trying to say. I got to cut a little bit of hay with the self-propelled. I think, what the heck was it? Like a John Deere 2280, I think was the number on that old self-propelled. That thing just seemed like it took forever, but the crazy thing is it cut just as much as those two old 9-footers. It was just nuts.
Yeah, that 2280 had a 14-foot head on it, didn't it?
It did, yeah. Man, the worst part with that thing was that old reel was it was big and bulky. It almost like being younger, it almost like make you hallucinate or put you in a trance. You just sit there just tired and exhausted, like you actually busted your butt all day.
Just watching that reel go around nice and hypnotic like.
Yeah. It was crazy. And what was crazy, though, is we had those 9-foot sickle bars, had the rivets in the sections. We didn't hardly change any sections. You hardly ever had knockouts. And we went to that 2280, and it seemed like, good grief, you'd make, I don't know, 8-10 rounds or maybe a little bit more. You'd knock a section or two out. It was unreal. And then, graduated up a little bit later in life, and finally the disc heads come out. I know John Deere had an earlier model, but the number we jumped into is a 4995 and had a 15-foot head. And good grief, man. Went from, that 2280, I think we were maybe cutting like 4 mile an hour or something like that. Once in a while you get up over 5 if you're lucky.
5-6 acres an hour is about all you can do with that.
Yeah. I mean, man, you really were covering ground in that era. 320, I think, New Holland or something like that's what we ended up with, a 16-foot reel head. And you could start cutting in that 6.5 range on alfalfa. I mean, man, it was like, whoa, this is where we needed to be. Like, we're running with the big dogs now, you know. Is like really impressed, which is a really nice cabin, those too. Then you get down the road about 12 mile an hour, or it was 11 point something anyway.
Just screaming down the road 11 miles an hour.
Yeah, it was so good, you know. And one thing, we were pretty fortunate. All of our fields, all of our land was pretty well connected. The family's land was all connected. So, you know, we could cut across pasture tops, or we could cut across other fields if we had to. So it wasn't like some operations where to go from one field to a field that's maybe 10 miles away, you know, it took all day. We were pretty fortunate. By the road, it might have been, say, 7 miles to our furthest field, but we'd take off and cut across through the hills or the pastures, cut that down 2-3 hours, you're up there, you know, and you get a productive day that way. You know, then that John Deere with that Moco, the disc head on it came, and good grief. I mean, then you're starting to talk, you know, you start getting into that, like 12 mile an hour, I think was the cutting speed on that thing.
At least 10 acres an hour, right? Just about
it
double.
Was. Yeah, it was. Or at least that's what the monitor always told me anyway. I hate to say it, but I mean, I was just looking for 5 o'clock at that point. But yeah, I mean, you could cover the ground then, you know, went from, you know, you hired a guy just because you didn't have enough time in the day to get anything, which is always, you know, the story for everything.
Yep.
But we had that extra guy because you needed to be getting the rake ready, or you need to be getting the baler ready. And then we jumped into that disc head, and all of a sudden you really didn't need that extra guy if you weren't looking to just really become efficient or really grow. I shouldn't really say on the efficient part, but
to really push and put up a big volume of hay is what you're saying. Yeah.
And in that same time frame, that's at the same time we went from just doing round bales to doing big square bales. Heston 4755 was our first 3x3 baler, which is really crazy to say, is we bought with 30,000 bales on it when we bought it. When Dad was telling me that he was thinking about buying this thing, I mean, you talk about like a leap of faith. Like this, he was nervous. We put that thing on the farm, and you know, we can knock the acres down and then turn around. You had the rake ready to go and the baler ready to go. You had the semi set in there. I mean, you could go out and get something done that night, or you could get some rest in before, whenever you're going into a night of knowing you're going to be out there literally till the sun comes up the next day.
So you guys are in a dry enough spot where you had to bale at night.
At times, yeah. We were in a really unique area as well. I guess I probably should have added to that a little bit of how in the diversification. But so where Niobrara is the Missouri River was the state's north boundary, which was against where Niobrara is. Mm-hmm. And then there's what's called the Niobrara River, which is just an in-state only river, but it runs from the west edge of the state out of Wyoming all the way out to the Missouri River there in Niobrara. And our land laid up into that Niobrara River Valley, which is a very wide and deep river valley. So it's kind of crazy. It definitely creates a lot of humidity at different times. It'll also kind of back off. I guess kind of depends on your pressure system and make a huge difference on that. Also had a lot of really good ground moisture. Like your dryland acres, literally you could dig down 6-8 feet and hit water. Like I had an excavator at one point and digging trees out and digging a hole to put the trees in to burn them. But yeah, you could dig down 8 feet. Literally, water just start gushing up out of the ground.
That's a pretty high water table.
It is, yeah. Like the soil wasn't right, though, to, say, dig a well and get good irrigation water, though, was the only bad part. So it was like a bittersweet part in there.
Sure. Just enough water to cause troubles.
Yeah, exactly. It was. But alfalfa loved it. You know, that was one thing. I mean, you're talking like first cutting, we could easily get 2 ton to the acre, a little over 2 ton to the acre on first cut. Mm-hmm. That stuff is always big, heavy, rank,
stammy,
hard to dry down. Yep. Yeah, it'd lay over, you know, and then that comes back to the sickle heads or the reel heads. You'd have to run slow and let that reel really work to pick that stuff up off the ground to get it to cut. Yep. And it was just nasty. And then when you'd slug, that stuff was just slimy.
Yep. That disc head is a different game.
It was incredible because, you know, I mean, yeah, you had to slow down a little bit if you wanted to pick up, but you were still running 6 to 8 mile an hour range, and it would, I don't know if that air would just cause a little vacuum, but it'd lift that hay a little bit and get you a cut, or you could tip that head a little better and get a better cut on it. And then that way second cutting was cleaner, gave us a better option to get a better quality up to put in a big square bale maybe.
I think that's what people will tell you is those disc headers do create a little bit of a vacuum.
Yeah.
That can be good or bad. If you're in wet conditions, it's not too bad, but if you're real dry, you can pull up some dirt into that windrow.
Yes, like that was one thing in our area. Nebraska is well known for the sand hills, and we weren't in the sand hills, but later in life we did venture out to the east edge of the sand hills and cover snakers just to get the tonnage. But we were definitely in a sandy area. Did have a lot of clay though, so pretty good soils in spots, and they had some pretty dry stuff due to the sand, or the clay'd get really tight. Made for interesting farming.
I can relate to all of that.
Yeah. No kidding.
In fact, Scott, I could relate to this entire conversation in a way I never expected. I'm in the process of upgrading a swather right now, and I'm kind of looking at a 4990 to replace a 12-foot sickle mower. So to hear you say that I'm going to gain a whole bunch of acres an hour and save on labor is kind of a nice thing to hear.
Darn right. And those machines are so much nicer. They're so much more operator friendly nowadays. I mean, like kids that were growing up in town, and we'd bring them out to the operation and we'd try to teach them and help them. And they'd get in there, we'd show them what to do, and they'd run it. You know, that's one thing. The machines that came a lot, I don't know, just user friendly in general. And better visibility is another big thing out of them. And then those disc heads are a little more forgiving than that sickle. So, you know, you can feel a vibration if there's something wrong. There's something to tattletale a little bit better than a section goes out right where the windrow is. And
you can't see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it always seemed like when that section went out, unless you were the guy that really, really cared about how your work looked, or if you were the owner of the thing, you know, you didn't take the look. You didn't take the time to look. But at least that disc head, it'll let you know. It starts vibrating at you. It's like, hey, we better get out and take a look. You know, either you got mud built up, or blade broke, or you know, something's wrong. Yeah. So kind of nice.
It certainly takes a special eye to look back at that windrow and go, something's not right. There's a little strip of hay under there that's not cut.
That's right. It's like, why is there there's a tick of a mohawk showing?
Yeah. And then you come back after you bailed and there's 6 or 8 rounds and you're going, oh, that looks horrible.
Well, what's even worse about that is whenever you go to that coffee shop, or if you go to the bar or something like that, and you got to hear all the neighbors.
It's always the field right next to the road too.
Darn right. Yeah.
It's never the one clear in the back that nobody ever sees. It's the one right next to the road.
Yes. Good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
It makes you want to hook onto the shredder and take off out there and get it cut right after you get done raking. Like, you don't want anybody to see that thing.
So much of it's just an inch or two wide. A lawnmower would do the trick.
Hey, man, that's one thing. These new zero turns around now, they'll get down the road 12 mile an hour. Cut some hay.
The biggest reason I'm looking at that 4990, I don't put a tremendous amount of hay up, but I do try to do it in a short window of time. We're only single cutting dryland Timothy.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we're trying to put up a year's worth of hay in 3 or 4 weeks. That's our entire hay season. Yeah, from the time you start, you're a little bit early and you're not quite at full yield. But by the time you get done, it's dry.
Really?
June's our wet season, and the end of July is as dry as it gets.
Man, that'd make for a stressful 30 days.
Well, then I have some irrigated alfalfa, and nothing like trying to do second cutting right in the middle of first cutting grass.
Oh, man.
And kind of like you, we're in a dry enough spot where you got to bail in the middle of the night sometimes.
Yeah.
So I get into the pickle where we have grass hay that's ready to go and alfalfa ready to go at the same time, and you're hauling the baler back and forth and baling 24 hours, and you can get kind of tired doing that.
You nailed it. That's exactly how ours was about second cutting. That's we had a bunch of prairie hay, and then also with my grandma's hunting operation, we had a lot of CRP or set-aside acres. And at that time, we were able to hay 33% of that thing every year. And we had a lot of acres of it. We'd run into that same situation because that's what being that right around the 4th of July. It always seemed like it was right around the 4th. It'd get really hot, really dry, and that grass was just, you could literally see it changing color every day.
Historically, what I'd tell you is we started cutting hay the first nice day after the 4th of July. Now, the last couple of years we've been starting earlier, and I'm not quite sure what's driving that. Every once in a while we can put up some export quality Timothy. One day to the next, 95 or 100 degrees can be the difference between making export grade and not.
Yes.
So as I'm looking at this mower, what can I do to get it done faster?
You're on it. That's a big part that I left out. When we made that transition from that sickle bar or that reel head to the disc mower, that's it. Because, yeah, you cover the acres. You're going to change from, 60 or 80 acres a day if you've got that kind of ground, that's flat and square.
Yep.
To all of a sudden, you're going to be in that 120 acres in a day if you want to. That's what's nice about that cutter, because that was definitely what we were able to do. We were getting into that 80 acres just with no trouble at all. Could get 100 no trouble without just totally wearing yourself out before having to put in that long night. Because even like now, like I've got a 9870 Massey, and that thing you can cut 17 mile an hour. When I was in Nebraska, I had an irrigated field that's 220 acres. And literally, kid that was working for me, he would get over to that field around 8 or 8:30 in the morning and start cutting the first rounds on that field. He'd come out of that thing 12 hours later, every cutting. Yep. He'd come out of the thing at 12 hours. 220 acres laid flat. We're ready to go. And that's what's really nice with those is that just the timing of getting that stuff all on the ground at the same time. Like you're saying, that the export quality is, it allows you to gain that extra quality to be able to put in that bale that's of a better grade than what it might have been 24 hours or 48 hours later from being beat down by the sun or catch that later day and end up with high humidity or 40 mile an hour wind or something like that possibly, and can't rake it together to save your life.
I haven't seen high humidity very many times, but I have seen a 40-acre field of hay blown up against a fence.
Yep. Why can't it just blow it into a windrow so you can bale it? That's the one thing I always wished. I was like, yeah, you'd see that whole field laid up against that fence and just stare at it like, how do I deal with this?
Yeah, you go and get the rake and the baler and the harrow bed all at once.
They used to do some the old farmhand sweeps and used to make the old stacks.
Yep.
I had one neighbor when I was old enough to see it anyway. I had one neighbor that was still doing it. And the one thing that always crossed my mind after the wind would just literally sweep a field clean, you'd sit there and look at that sweep, just be like, man, I wonder how that would work.
Maybe that's the right tool for this scenario.
That's right. Yeah. Dad had a couple of those laying up on the hill. My dad wouldn't he'd throw stuff away, but he'd never actually get rid of it. It was just sitting up on the side of the hill or in a pile.
I know. That's a pretty normal farmer thing.
Yeah, it is. That's it, man. We had those sweeps. And those little farm hands sitting there. And I don't know how many different times I'd tell him, I'm like, gosh, that's some really good square tubing. I'm like, I could cut that up and use it for something. He's like, stay out of that. Might need that for something. Like what? Like what do you want it for, man? I'm like, we got projects we could use that for. Like put an extension on the semi trailer and haul another 4 more bales. I'm like that. That gave me another $100, on the load. And he's like, I don't care. You go buy your own iron. Like, oh gosh, man, come on. So a little bit interesting every now and then.
One of the things I've learned is that iron really isn't that expensive, especially if you start talking about that $100 a load kind of stuff. Iron's pretty cheap, and if you have some spare time and you're willing to manufacture stuff, it's pretty economical.
It absolutely is, yeah. You see it a lot, the strapping thing, like iron on a hay trailer. We put those side rails and kick it up about 6 or 8 inches, and it helped kick those bales into the trailer, into the center. And then we'd double row, so you'd be 2 wide on the bottom and 2 wide on top. So it'd be 2 wide, 2 high. And then for strapping sakes, oh my goodness, man, you'd strap those things. You give it all you got anyway, just so it's safe. But literally bad to say, but you could really round some corners.
Now, again,
we ran 5x6 round bales.
Oh, geez. So, again, we're on the same page here in a way I didn't expect. So I grew up on a dairy, and we had a 604J Vermeer baler, so we were running 4x5s.
Yeah.
We had a trailer that must have been 16 feet. Let me think about this. 5-foot diameter bales stacked like beer cans, 4 long, 2 high, and 2 wide. So we were getting 16 bales on that trailer, plus 1 on the grapple. And we had the same kind of setup on that trailer where the edges were kicked up a little bit, and it made the bales lean in against one another.
Yep.
When we're hauling on the farm, not ever seeing a county road, you just put 16 bales on and 1 on the grapple, and off to the barn you went. You can get about 1,000 pounds into one of those bales, especially in alfalfa. You start talking 8.5 tons at a trip, you can get some hay hauled in a day.
Clean a field off in a good amount of time.
Yeah.
And that was our thing with that too, as well, is if it was one of those trying to beat a rainstorm or something, and clean, or if we bought the hay out of a field, we'd drive along with the semi, or a guy would be in the semi driving along, and then me or Dad would be running the tractor and setting those bales on. Well, having those rails that kick, like you said, kick it up. Then we didn't have to strap until we got done loading it. Then at that point we could do that. So that way we were good in the curves. We were hitting the public roads with that thing. But you did nail it though, is like on our family land, everything was connected. If we were on ours and we had roads through it, but we'd get on those, and man, like you said, there you were good. It wasn't that you got carried away, but you could go nice and easy and save you that extra 20 minutes of messing around with straps. And those things they save you so much monkeying around. That's the best part. We had a little bit taller ones. We bought a trailer one time. I think they probably came up 10 to 12 inches. Even on big square bales, they still fit inside those rails. Mm-hmm. But just having those, like rubbing on those bales, it also helped being across the field. They didn't try to sway much, I guess, because they had that extra brace holding them in there as well. Worked pretty good, gathering bales in the field with the semi driving along on the loader, loading them. And then that way he could take off for the hay barn while you're still gathering bales out there, help clean up a little quicker. But yeah, it's pretty impressive.
We have a lot of overlap here because I've run a 320 New Holland. I've owned a 2280 John Deere, and now I'm looking at that 4990 John Deere disc mower.
That's nice. Yeah. If my wife ever allows me to trade the 9870, we'll have to talk. I just don't know if she's going to let me. The price tags on these things have gotten way out of hand.
That's kind of my thought process on this 4990. It pretty well has the capacity of a newer machine. It's used. It's probably well used. But for somewhere between 500 and 600 acres I'm trying to get over in a short period of time, it's probably going to work. And I get the efficiencies and the new stuff and the cost of something that's used. That's
the thing. You're in a good machine. They're well built. They've got a really, really good skid plate under the head of them. So like if you have any, I don't know if you get into some of that rockier terrain or anything like that, that thing's going to take it really well. It's definitely not a worry. What's also nice too, is since things have changed so much over the last probably 6 years. How many different models of cutters that have came out in that amount of time. So what's cool about that is like you go back into that model. It's depreciated down truly as far as it's going to be for quite a while.
Yeah. So barring a catastrophic failure, that the price tag on what I'm paying versus what I can sell it for, it's going to change a little bit, but not a lot. There's always going to be demand for a used machine where somebody doesn't want to make pay $250,000 for a new swather.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the thing. You're talking about being able to get multiple years out of it, and still being able to turn around and flip that thing if you ever want to.
Kind of like that 4020 you were talking about. I have one of those too. The 4020 now is worth what it was new.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now you take into account inflation and it's worth less, but the nominal value is the same.
That's right, man. Most dependable stuff, because you don't have all this junk they've got on them. Sorry to say it, but man, the sensors and the relays that they put on these things that drive me nuts,
That certainly is a conversation that agriculture's having. I hope that somewhere along the line we can have a civil conversation about, do I want to be able to service my equipment? Do I want to be able to at least do the troubleshooting and get started on the fix?
That's right.
You know, the companies that I like best right now are the ones that don't require you to have a service tech come out. The reality of the situation is there's all sorts of laws and regulations that they have to conform to, and they have to make it so you can't screw with their stuff.
Yep.
The equipment manufacturers are operating in the environment that they have to, and we have to figure out how we want to respond.
You think that the manufacturers know it. I mean, you look at the sales, early 90s, late 80s equipment.
I know,
those things,
right?
Even the early 2000s. I mean, the resale value is insane on them. You know,
maybe my 4020 is getting more valuable.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, especially you go into like row crop country in the central Midwest up there, like especially like over in Iowa, growing up in Nebraska, go over into Iowa, and those guys would literally, they'd remodel a 4020 and they'd have it hooked onto a shredder. They might have a little pull type sprayer, and they're spraying the edge of the fields, and they're mowing the ditches and everything, the waterways. I mean, just manicuring places with them. Tractors are immaculate. It's something that they can work on too. They can tinker with it. It's something they can always mess with. Cheap too is the other thing. It's nice.
Oh yeah,
like
absolutely.
Gosh, like I've had an R series John Deere, and I swear to you, every year it'd have a fuel sensor would go out, so the tractor wouldn't even start. Park it for the winter, come out the next spring, go to start it.
Nothing.
Great.
Yeah.
Call John Deere.
Right.
And then same thing, we had a central fill planter, and it was like, go to the field, you'd be planting along. It seemed like every other year, computer would go out on it. It's like, good grief, man, come on.
Tremendous productivity, though, when it is running.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'd knock out a quarter of ground in a day, no problem. I mean, some of those times when you're trying to beat some weather, I mean, I think the best I did was just a few acres over 200 one time. That was a long day. I was pushing the limit a little bit, trying, and we're putting fertilizer on at the same time. And oh my goodness, you're wearing yourself out. But it seems like that's kind of the thing. Agriculture's hurry up and wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And it all has to be done yesterday.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's amazing with planting, you think about planting times, it's like you could plant today, wait 1 week, plant in the same number, same maturity, and plant 1 week from that day, and you'll harvest it 1 day later.
Right.
It's the same moisture. It's just crazy.
Right.
But we fought tooth and nail like it was a race, we got to get there. That was one thing, at least with hay, you're always at Mother Nature's mercy, and you're always at the capacity's mercy of your equipment.
Let's take a break there, and we'll get a word from our sponsor.
I'm Danny Wan, and I switched to the Vermeer 604R because I believe this baler is built to last. I bale about 4,000 bales a year, and I think as much money you give for a baler, if they need to bale 4,000 bales a year, even if it's for 10 years, they need to get it done. The day I ran it, we absolutely had no issues at all. It fired up, and I baled like some guy. It just baled all day long.
Hear the full story at makinghay.com/haykings.
I had the good opportunity to speak at the Ag Outlook Forum in D.C. last week. Oh. That was quite the experience. I got to meet the Secretary of Ag, and I was geeking out the whole time. I had somebody ask me if I'm the guy that keeps the balance sheet on hay. The kind where they take the beginning stocks and you add the production, and you add imports, and you subtract exports, and then you subtract use, and it gets you to some ending stock number. And then you look at the stocks to use ratio, and you can start to make inferences about prices and where the price is going to go, right?
Yeah.
This is the story of corn, soybeans, and wheat. Somebody asked me if I was the guy for hay.
Oh, man.
And I said, I don't know what kind of fool tries to predict hay prices.
That's tough.
Because one rainstorm, and it all goes out the window.
Absolutely.
And it's worse when it's one unexpected rainstorm and everybody has hay down. There's times in Washington where one rainstorm is tens of millions of dollars of damages and lost sales.
Not only just the rainstorm with the hay being down on the field or ready to be cut the next day, but if that tarp blows off, or you get a little bit of hail and it punctures the tarp, or blows up underneath the roof of the barn. I mean,
right.
So many horrible variables.
It's not a grain bin.
No,
it's different.
Not at all. Yeah.
There's
right.
a lot more shrink on hay, I think.
Yeah, the moisture gets up underneath the pile. And, well, I better be careful on that one. You guys tarp a little different out in your region versus the Midwest.
Yeah, we do.
The Midwest just throws one up over the top, call it a day.
There's some of that here, but for our good hay, it gets fully wrapped. I don't think most folks know that they'll put a tarp down on the ground and then stack hay on top of it, kind of wrap the bottom tarp up the sides, put a top tarp and sides, and it's a fully wrapped stack.
Man, they do a good job. It's really cool to get to see that. That's one thing I'm so happy to have gotten the opportunity to come out there and Pat Tweedy with Steffens haul me along up there to Washington to that Northwest Hay Expo and showing me the different stuff from different hay operations and how they operate, and like the tarping, and he brought it up. I mean, he asked me, he goes, you guys tarp like that, don't you? And it's like, no, not even close, man.
You mean you don't have two companies that just
No.
tarp hay?
Yeah, I wish, but no.
In Washington and Idaho, we do. We have a couple of companies that's their business, is they put tarps on haystacks, and then when it's ready to ship the hay, they come and pick the tarps up and they get reused.
Oh, they actually will take them back.
Yeah, no, the tarping company's just renting you those tarps.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
well,
so
that's good, though.
Now, you only get a couple of uses, and how good your crew is really matters.
Yeah.
But like those side tarps, eventually they turn into the bottom tarps, and they'll start poking holes in them and those kind of things. So there's a life cycle to those tarps, but they get reused.
I don't know. We'd try to get 5 years out of them, it seemed like. But by the 5th year, it seemed like you had more patch tape over them and more mess and more headache out of it.
Yeah, there's
Rope
no patch
spray.
tape on these.
No.
That's
That's really good.
That's how you identify the bottom tarp.
Heck, that makes it good. And then those guys then, just kind of out of curiosity here, but say you got the hay put up, 30 days later, 45 days later, it had that little bit of shrink and it's time to tighten those up. Does that tarp company come back around to the fields, or is that kind of on the farmer at that point?
That's a good question. The hay sweats out. A lot of the time they'll make the stacks with the prevailing wind and leave the top ends open. So if you think about an old red barn with the barn doors, if the barn doors are open and you get that wind blowing through, that's basically what they do with those stacks. And
so they do want it loose a little.
Not loose, just the ends are open so you get airflow, because just like hay in the Midwest, hay sweats no matter where you're at. And for a couple of weeks. What the tarps really do is they protect from sun bleach on the outside and, of course, any rain. I'm going to guess somewhere along the line somebody comes back and tightens those strings just a little bit.
Definitely, yeah, because that was always our thing. It seemed like we'd get done with first cutting, and then right before we'd go to second cutting, which is always around that, say 26 to 30 days, we'd have to walk out across the field and start drawing her down tight again so the next windstorm wouldn't yank the tarp off of there or something like that.
I'm no expert, but what they'll tell you is if you align it with the prevailing wind and you leave the ends open, the tarps won't blow off.
I mean, it makes sense, because then at least you're pulling evenly on all of the tension strings.
That's the theory
And
anyways.
It's drafting. On some of the ones that we've had tore off, they're either setting kind of kitty corner to the way the wind's hitting them, or straight east and west. They're just catching all of it. On the one side, breaks the twine loose first, and then you get one of those flapping, then it's in trouble after that.
Oh, yeah. Once that tarp's flapping, you're done.
Yep.
If you're not right there to fix it, it's all over but the tears.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. But yeah, I'd have happily paid a tarp company a handful of times rather than riding that big blimp to the ground. It's a little interesting from 20 feet in the air.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to imagine. A lot of people are probably sitting here thinking whenever they hear this, they're like, yeah, right. But unless you've been there, trust me, you can fly.
Oh, no. I've definitely got family that they told me they rolled onto the corner of the tarp and they went up in the air with it.
Yep. Yep.
They just
One
about
thing
had the
about
tarp down on the stack and were working real quick to get it tied down before the storm blew in, and up in the air they went.
And one thing about it, don't let go.
Yeah, you'll come back down.
You will. You just hope that it comes down as nice as it took off up. And not come down as a frisbee or a pancake.
Yeah. We definitely have scenarios where the hay gets put up just a little bit too green, and you got to pull the tarps off and let it breathe a little bit.
Yeah,
So
done that too.
On the export hay, they got to be under 12% moisture, because as they're filling those containers, it rains in the containers if you're too high in moisture. I suspect anybody in the Midwest or East Coast will tell you that that's the thing if they've ever tried to store hay in containers. When you're paying the kind of money that that the Japanese and the South Koreans and the Chinese are paying for this hay, you can't have that. So the export buyer will come out and stick the moisture meter in, and if it's over 12, they might wait, and they might come back in a month. Or they might say, you should pull this tarp off.
Yeah, darn right.
Let that stack breathe a little bit. Otherwise, we're not interested. You might be able to move it domestically, but moisture's a big deal.
We've done that a few times. Like the dairy barns. Dairy barns are always big about being under 16, and then they'd put them in like 100 by 200 foot barn and stack it 6 bales high. And that was always our thing. But kind of a similar deal is, you tarped it just to get away from that rain. But as soon as that rain got away, we might track across the field and make a little bit of a mud track, but we'd go out, we'd actually stick a tarp under where we're stacking those bales, we'd gap them out 6-inch spacing between each stack, and then still throw that tarp up over top of it just to protect in case any more wind, or sorry, not wind, but rain or any other. And then that way that air could get between those bales, get them dried down. It did pretty good for the most part. We'd still have some damaged bales where they'd heat a little too much and end up that caramelization or tobacco cure. And we'd feed it to our cows or haul it to a feed yard. Always seemed like, at least you saved the majority of it and didn't have much loss and still get to haul it off to the dairy, and they were happy.
Scott, tell me about your hay press.
When I mentioned earlier that Pat Tweedy from Steffens gave me the opportunity to come up into that Northwest region and tour some hay operations, I sold out of our Nebraska operation and purchased a place in Texas. When I did so, we dropped away from row crop. It left some money on the table, and I was able to put towards buying a hay slicer from the Steffens Systems out of Oregon. Something that I've wanted to do, honestly, since I've been 19 years old. There was a hay slicer operation in Yankton, South Dakota, T3600, and it sliced 3x3s and 3x4s. We used to sell hay to zoos. We actually cracked open into a lot of feed stores back then when guys were saying that you couldn't do it with the hay slicer. We had really good results with it. It was incredible what we were doing with it. And due to some unforeseen circumstances, that deal didn't work out. Well, that thing just stuck in the back of my head. I couldn't afford it when it came up for sale. Whenever I got the opportunity to sell for a pretty good price in Nebraska and relocate into Texas, the opportunity was on the table again. And there's no hay slicers in Texas. I mean, there's been a couple. They've ran into some issues. I think, and at least what I've heard, that those are some investor type deals. Didn't work out. It wasn't that it wasn't financially working. It's just they had different ideas. So in my deal, no investor but me and my wife. I better hold up on that one. She might smack me upside the head for that. She stuck her neck out on this with me. They're definitely not a cheap item. They're definitely not for somebody that's just looking to experiment in the marketplace. So we did. We stuck our neck out and we purchased a new 3600 twine tie system instead of a strapper system, with full intentions of being able to bring 3x3s and 3x4s of straight grass, alfalfa grass mix, straight alfalfa, straw, hoping to run that through, slice it into little bales in which it'll make, 50 to 60 pound 3-tie bales is what they'll be. And then we've got a end unit on there that'll bundle and strap into a bundle. And then we can either spear it or set it on a pallet. And then that way, at the end user point, we can either go to a feed store or we can go straight to a ranch or a boarding facility or a zoo, just anything. I mean, you can have a set of spears, poke into it, a grapple, grab it, pallet forks and slide underneath of it and pick it up. gives you a really versatile bundle. And not to take away from the other bundling units that are out in the marketplace that are picking up these little 2-tie bales. This thing is so much more compact. You can stack up a lot higher. It takes up less space. Gives some of these, there's like the rodeo people that are traveling across the road that got hay pods on top of their trailer. Now they can stick another 150 pounds more in top of that hay pod than they could with a traditional 2-string bale. So they can get a couple more days out of that, or, honestly, they can get a few more days out of it without having to buy that, maybe the overpriced stuff on the road. I better be careful because I'm also trying to sell to that retailer that's trying to resell it. So I better be careful on some of that. But yeah, it's just been a dream that we've wanted to do for so long. We really wished we could have done that in Nebraska. Not that financially that we couldn't have swung it, but we had some other hiccups in there that we didn't have the power in the area that we were living in. So it cost pretty much a small fortune to get the power put in to operate that machine. I've bugged Pat and I've bugged Dave Steffen for so long on that thing. I mean, there for a while, it almost felt like I got to know them just because I was always bugging them about a slicer, whether it was pricing a new one or, hey, there's a used one popped up at whatever state. You might be interested in this one. They've done really good. I mean, that family is incredibly humble. They didn't know who I was. They didn't have to take the time out of their day, or as many days as they did to deal with, at that time, a punk kid that was dreaming big and just couldn't do it. Then I moved down here, and then I reach out to them, and I'm like, hey, I'm sitting in a position I can finally make this happen. And it hasn't been an easy one either. We purchased this thing a year ago, back in January. Dave and Pat, they shipped it down here right around the 4th of July. We finally got this installed. I mean, no joke, about 3 weeks ago, got power to it, hooked up, and actually ran some hay through it here just first week in February is the first hay we got to finally run through it. So talk about a long journey.
That does sound like quite the process. It's not exactly the same as going down to the dealership and buying the baler.
Not a bit. And it's intimidating too. So anybody that's out there, because I've been very open about buying it. I've been very open, like if different people contact me and question me about it, and I'm really open about it because I'm super happy that I've gotten the opportunity to purchase this thing and the opportunity to go back and do what I was doing at one time, to offer hay to some retail locations in these smaller bales, these little more compact bales. I just really look forward to that. And for the end user, they can either buy that big bale for their house and then have that little bale that's sliced out of the same quality of hay to take out on the road, just to give them that opportunity. There's just something different on the marketplace. Always feels like we always try to set ourselves apart a little bit, kind of as a sales pitch, maybe a little bit. The hay slicer thing is definitely something that, like watching guys, like I'm going to use Tim Hall, because Tim Hall's on Instagram, Tim Hall's on Facebook, and I'm going to tell you, he goes by the Hay Ninja. This man is incredible to watch. That guy makes hay slicing look easy. It's not. Tim's a super good guy. I've bugged Tim's many a times about slicers and stuff like that, and it's just fun to talk to those other guys. Like Mike Kill, I've bugged him just a little bit. He's got a hay slicer. He's actually got a similar one to what I have, or I have someone. I better be careful of that. I have a similar one to him. It's a twine tie model, and those guys have all been. That's one thing that's really neat about all of them. They're all really nice guys. Like, you can call them, or you can email them, you can text them, you can Facebook message them, and you can ask them some little things. And they're all nice. They take the time to talk to you. They're what farming is thought to be, or what used to definitely be. Kind of that neighborly. You can reach out to them and they will communicate with you. They'll give you some tips or tricks if you needed it.
I want to pause there because you just said that these farmers handling presumably tens of thousands of tons of hay at scale are just good, down-to-earth guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing. Like, super down to earth. It's like an art, it's like an art. They've got their niche in the marketplace, and they know it. They're comfortable with what they have. They're comfortable with what they're doing, and they feel good about talking to you. I don't know. Is it maybe because you're still your own person? You can't just go and copy them and make it turn out the same. Hay will fool you, and especially through these slicers, it can be the most beautiful hay, and you go to pump it through that slicer, it could turn out an absolute disaster. Like, I got some really good orchard grass. I mean, this stuff is absolutely incredible. I mean, whenever you got the Steffen family down here working on the slicer, and we're slicing these things through, and they're sitting there telling you, like, oh my gosh, this is nice. I mean, that's what's so cool.
Oh, they know what nice hay is. That's for sure.
That's right. And Dale Steffen is the one that's helping, and Travis that works for Steffen's, he was here. They're doing a great job. I mean, these guys are making slicing look simple. And so they turned the controls over to me, and we'll just say it kind of looked like a headless chicken maybe for a little while. I was frantic. I'd panic over the dumbest things. I mean, little red light would be flashing on the control panel, and I'd be looking at those guys, and they're like, we're not here. And I'm sitting there going like, but you're here. And they'd just be like, calm down, pull the strings, hit the button, it'll run. Like, okay, all right. And
you're talking about riding a learning curve.
Oh my gosh, huge learning curve. If I could remember what it was like to ride a bicycle with no training wheels for the first time, I'm going to guess it's probably pretty close to that. But you had a big hill to go down, though, on the first ride.
Right.
No, definitely a learning curve. I definitely haven't figured it out yet. I ran into a little complications, so we're shut down for a little bit. I don't know if it was operator error or not yet. I've just had a few things going on the last few days, so I haven't had time to go in and troubleshoot with Steffen's on it. We're hoping maybe Monday or Tuesday I'm going to finally get to climb in there. And the other thing, beauty of technology, I can throw them on FaceTime, and they can see what I'm seeing, and we can work on it. So that's kind of a neat thing.
It's pretty neat how small the world is.
That is, absolutely, yeah, because, it's only roughly, 1,400 miles, 1,200 miles, something like that.
Yeah, it's a little way.
It's only a couple hours time zone difference. So I can sleep in a little bit and then still have those guys help me when they're getting to work. But it's really neat. And then the other thing on that slicer is Dave's got it set up that as long as I get an internet connection, I can hook a laptop computer up to it, and then he can go in and run diagnostic on it, and he can see what's going on for pressures, timing. He can also reset some stuff on there if it needs it. It's really neat what they've got. I mean, for a machine, when you walk up to it, you're like, oh, that's pretty neat. Just a bunch of iron, green, white, and yellow. You get into it, and it's way more complex, and it's neat. It's neat what they can do with it.
Let's go back to your marketing plan to go along with this. You were talking about feed stores and zoos and those kind of things. What else are you thinking?
With my slicer, it'd be tough to do an export. I can't put the compression down on the bale to make much over that 60. If I do, it'd be kind of hard to do. I run into a little bit of an issue there, so I'm a little bit out on that. One thing I thought is in the area, because I'm in Texas now, so one thing that happens down here is a lot of little 2-string bales and that coastal and Bermudas. They're buying those bundlers, and you can only cover so many acres with a small baler, and it takes so much more manpower to do that. We've got a big square baler. We know of a few other guys in the area that are running big square balers. What we're hoping to do, and we've talked to the guys, like we've got a family in the area right here, the Russell family. They've done Bermuda for quite a long time. They've got a big square baler, and we've talked to them a little bit about hopefully getting to custom slice. They got little square balers, and they've got a couple of bundlers. We're really hoping we can get those guys to come in. We'll custom slice for them, just so many dollars a ton. And then that way they bring the truckload in, we'll slice through it. When they bring the next one in, we'll set those little bales on a truck for them. Or if they needed to, they could send a customer down and pick it up. We're not, we can sign those non-competes and stuff like that, or non-disclosures. That way their customer's their customer. We definitely don't want to touch that at all. We just want to be able to slice hay. I mean, that's really what it's about. We really enjoy the hay side of the ag market. I mean, it'd be neat to do the exporting. We've done a little bit of that in the past. Whenever that slicer was in South Dakota, we exported to Russia. What a cool experience. I mean, dealt with a broker the whole time, so it really wasn't anything strenuous on us. I mean, biggest things like you touched on, getting under that 12% moisture. We had enough hay, and it was low grade. It was just lower grade feed quality alfalfa. So it was just mainly all first cutting, big stemmy, really dry, almost brown. But that was pretty easy on our part as far as what we had to do. They gave us some guidelines. We just had to meet them, and we did. I mean, it'd be fun to do that here, and then talking about like possible marketing. So I import twine, netwrap, and bale film, and when those factory owners come over and visit us, I showed them, or I introduced them to what else we do besides dealing with them. And when they seen the little bales, the first thing that goes off in their head is, we know people that import these from the country. They're like, will you sell to us? Like, I'd like to, but I don't know if I can really fill a 40-foot can with enough weight to justify the bad parts. There is potential. I'm definitely not going to say no to it. It's worth a try and see if we can meet those requirements or close enough to those requirements that they're satisfied. But I just don't know if I can. Pretty new, pretty fresh at it, and definitely intimidated. I'm looking at it. I never mark anything off the table. I'll put it like that. I guess I'm pretty open-minded. In agriculture, you definitely have to be open-minded. In the hay world, definitely, because you never know until you try with hay, or until somebody does.
Thank you so much for sharing.